Donald Glover, aka Childish Gambino, just released his third studio album. I just heard it. Here's what I thought. So if you don't know Donald Glover, you must be literally living under a rock, because he is one of the most prolific artists of our time. I've been following him since high school when he did Derek Comedy on YouTube. I don't know if you saw their sketches, but they were unbelievable at the time. I haven't really watched them to see if they hold up. He was a genius far before any of the stuff he does now. He found his way into the mainstream when he played Troy on the show Community, so that's where most people know him from. But around the same time, he started his musical project, Childish Gambino. He had a couple early mixtapes, including ones called I Am Not a Rapper, where he used a lot of popular indie rock beats and he rapped over them. First studio album, Camp, for me, was a little underwhelming. It was good, but not great. He released a mixtape after that called Royalty, and that's where he really caught my ear. The combination of his awesome beats with his really clever and witty lyricism, he was an artist unlike most of the artists on the scene at the time. Following Royalty was Because of the Internet, which was one of my favorite albums of the year, not just hip-hop, and one of my favorite hip-hop albums of all time. It's hilarious, the beats are out of this world, I'm really upset I never got to see it live, and I'm hoping he still performs it live because he just released his third studio album, Awaken My Love, and it sounds nothing like anything he has ever done. The first track he released, Me and Your Mama, was jarring in the sense of I was expecting when I heard there was a new Gambino album coming out that it would be really hip-hop heavy, maybe a new direction than Because of the Internet, but this direction is completely different, as in changing genres. This album cannot be described as a hip-hop album because he doesn't rap a single bar on it. This is straight up a neo-soul psychedelia album. This album is dripping with 70s influence, and I wasn't sure if the whole thing was going to sound like that single, and honestly, it does maintain that aesthetic throughout the entire album. And that's not bad, it's just not what I was expecting, and arguably not what I was hoping for, because I think Gambino's at his best when he's rapping. But, with that said, I really enjoyed this album, and here's what I thought of it. Me and Your Mama starts off with this twinkling, and then it leads into this very lush production. These angelic kind of voices swirl around the beat. It is absolutely entrancing. About 2 minutes in, the sound becomes a little harsher, almost encapsulating psychedelic garage rock, and Gambino melodically screams over the beat. This track is interstellar. It is one of the best ways to start an album, and it really got me excited. It ends on kind of a quiet note, and then Have Some Love immediately starts with some heavy drums to bring you right back into it if you were zoning out for a second. And this track is straight out of the 70s. It is so soulful, and Gambino replicates that era seemingly effortlessly. The next track, Boogie Man, just keeps the groove going. Honestly, at this point, it could all be one long track and I would just be into it. It was very similar to what we had heard prior to it, but it doesn't feel stale yet. It feels still very fresh, and I want to see where it goes. Zombies feels almost like a less dancey B-side to Thriller. His ever so slightly auto-tuned vocals are very creepy as he sings about no escape from a zombie invasion, and the ending has this really cool synthy outro. This was just a great track. There's a lot of harsh psychedelic noise up until this point, but the next track, Redbone, was one of the tracks he released prior to the album that I listened to. It is a break in the action. I think where it's placed in the album is perfect. It features Gambino with some very heavily pitched up vocals, and honestly, this could have been a Prince song, and I mean that in the best way possible. I'm also getting a little bit of D'Angelo vibes. The song California has a bit of a reggae twist to it, and while that's a little different than the whole funky soul thing he's doing prior, it still fits within the realm of the album. I honestly can't wait to be on the beach next summer and listen to this track. It's short, but it's sweet. At this point in the album is Baby Boy, a track that is 6.5 minutes long, clocking in at the longest track on the album, and I think it's kind of a snooze fest. This is where the album started to lose me. I was really feeling it, I was vibing with it. This track was so long, and it doesn't demonstrate anything that we haven't heard already. There is a cool spoken word outro at the end, and this might be the first time on the album we actually hear Gambino's regular voice that doesn't have an effect or him singing high-pitched falsetto. The Night Me and Your Mama Met is the second to last track on the album, and I really like this track. I think that it's interesting how they take this kind of soft, I can't tell if it's a guitar or a ukulele, but they take this soft string instrument and that plays the whole background of the song, but then over it are these harsher kind of synthier tones, and then wrapped around it are these gospel oohs and ahs. It's a really cool, interesting track. I can't wait to actually go back to that one and kind of dissect it a little more. I believe this track is the only fully instrumental track on the album, and that brings us to the final track, Stand Tall. This is where Gambino comes in singing without any vocal effect, a very familiar and welcome sound. The final third of this song is by far my favorite part of this album. It has a very tropical feel to it, almost like the intro track to Since I Left You by the Avalanches. I really wish that more of the album had that specific sound to it, but that's just a personal preference. Having heard this album, I think that this is absolutely a love letter to Parliament Funkadelic, specifically Maggot Brain. Far from a direct copy, it still manages to encapsulate the feel of that album while having its own completely distinct sound. It's funny, I saw a Childish Gambino Amoeba What's in My Bag video, and he specifically picked out Maggot Brain and said that it was one of his favorite albums. That was years ago, so it's really cool that years later he's able to take that and directly influence one of his major studio albums. I really enjoyed this album. I'm going to be honest and say that it let me down in the sense of I had a higher expectation based off the first single. Even if it was all that style, which it was a great groove all the way through, but there was nothing groundbreaking for me. And to be even more honest, when I heard a new Childish Gambino album was coming out, I was really excited to get more rap, and there was none of it. Nitpicking aside, I highly recommend this, especially if you like funk and soul. Arbitrary score to 10, I'm going to give this a solid 8. It isn't as great as the best albums of this year for me, but it certainly is a cut above the rest. I think this album might divide his fans. I think it could usher in a new wave of Childish Gambino fans that aren't huge hip-hop people, but might be able to appreciate this new side of his persona. But the people that wanted something like this are going to be disappointed. If you're a fan, are you impressed with the direction? Do you feel like it's lacking? I want to know what you think, so leave a comment and I'll respond with any thoughts that I may have. If you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and more videos coming at you soon.